My left hand hurts this morning. It hurts most mornings. A dull ache in the knuckles, deep, as though something is pressing against the bones from inside. I have shown it to physicians over the years, 3 of them, maybe 4. They examine the hand. They bend the fingers. They find nothing. No swelling, no deformity, no cause they can identify. The hand is old, but it is sound. There is nothing wrong with my left hand. The pain is not in my hand. The pain is next to my hand, in the space beside it where another hand used to be. My sister's hand, my twin's hand, Colette's hand, which held mine every day for 19 years, and then was not there, and has not been there for 67 years, and my hand has never stopped reaching for it. The knuckles ache because they are gripping something that is not there, the way a jaw aches from clenching in sleep. My hand is holding a ghost, and the ghost is heavy, and I cannot put it down because I do not know how to open fingers that closed around another person's fingers before I was old enough to remember closing them. I should tell you who I am and who we were. I say we because that is where I must begin. There was no I for the first 19 years of my life. There was only we. Odette and Colette, les Jumelles, the twins, spoken in the parish as though it were one word, one name, one creature with 2 bodies and one shared heart. My name is Odette Marie Broussard, born Odette Marie Thibodeau on the 14th of October, 1841 in St. Martin Parish, Louisiana, on my father's farm along Bayou Teche, 2 miles north of the town of St. Martinville. I arrived first. 7 minutes later, Colette arrived second. This was the original arrangement, and it held for 19 years. I went first in nothing. Colette went first in everything, except being born, which was the one time I was ahead of her, and even that, I suspect, was an accident of positioning rather than initiative. I need to explain where we live because the place is part of the story, in a way that places have not been part of any story I have ever told. Though I have not told many stories, because the only story I have is this one, and I have kept it inside me for 67 years. Bayou Teche is a slow brown river that winds through St. Martin Parish the way a snake moves through grass, unhurried, taking its time, going where it wants. The water is the color of coffee with milk. The banks are lined with oaks so old their branches reach across the water and touch on the other side, and the moss hangs from those branches like gray curtains, and the light that comes through is green and gold and dappled, and nothing in this landscape moves quickly because the heat will not permit it. The air is thick, wet. You breathe it and you feel it enter you like warm cloth. In summer, the heat is a living presence, a 4th or 5th member of every room you enter, and you learn to move slowly, not because you are lazy, but because the alternative is collapse. My family was Cajun, French-speaking people whose ancestors had come from Acadia, from Nova Scotia, expelled by the British in the 1750s, scattered across the world and resettled in the Bayou country of Louisiana where the land was cheap and the French language could survive and the Catholic faith could be practiced without apology. My father, Prosper Thibodeau, farmed 60 acres of sugarcane along the bayou. Sugarcane was the cash crop of the Teche country. You planted it in the wet heat of late summer, watched it grow through the autumn, and cut it in November and December when the weather cooled enough for the work to be survivable, which was a relative term since cane cutting was never truly survivable, only endurable. The cut cane went to the sugar mill, a great grinding machine that pressed the juice from the stalks, and the juice was boiled and refined into sugar and molasses. The whole parish smelled of boiling sugar during grinding season, a smell so sweet it became sickening, and I cannot encounter that smell now without my left hand beginning to ache because grinding season was November, and November is when Colette died. Our mother was Celeste Thibodeau, born Celeste Landry, a small woman, dark-haired, quick-moving, who managed her household and her husband and her children, and the garden and the chickens and the cooking, with a competence that was specifically Cajun in its nature, which is to say it was competence wrapped in warmth. Maman Celeste could scold you and feed you in the same gesture. She could correct your grammar in French while stirring a roux that would become the gumbo, that would become the center of the evening meal, that would become the occasion for the family to gather around the table and talk and argue and laugh and eat in the manner that Cajun families have conducted. Evenings since before, there was a Louisiana for them to conduct them in. Maman could not tell us apart. Not until we were 3, when Colette fell from the porch and cut her chin on the edge of a planting pot. The scar was small, a thin white line, perhaps half an inch long, on the left side of her jaw. It was the only visible difference between us. Without it, we were identical. Same dark hair, same brown eyes, same height, same build, same face, looking back from 2 directions as though God had made one girl, and then, unsatisfied with the singularity of her, had made another from the same material. People in the parish asked Maman how she managed. She said she did not manage. She loved the same child twice, and hoped she was distributing the love to the correct one at least half of the time. I must explain what being a twin is, because people who are not twins believe they understand it, and they do not. They think it is like being very close siblings, like having a best friend who lives in your house, like being 2 people who happen to look alike. It is not like any of these things. Being a twin is like being one person who has been divided for reasons that were never explained, and who spends their life trying to stand close enough to the other half that the seam does not show. We, Colette and I, thought the same thoughts. I do not say this as a charming exaggeration. I say it as a fact that I observed daily for 19 years. One of us would begin a sentence and the other would finish it, not because we had guessed what the other was going to say, but because we were both saying the same thing from 2 mouths. We reached for the same dish at the same moment. We turned our heads in the same direction at the same sound. We fell asleep at the same time and woke at the same time and dreamed on more occasions than I could count the same dream, or dreams so similar that the differences were trivial. Maman said it was because we had shared a womb, and the sharing had not ended when we emerged from it. Papa said it was because God had run out of ideas and given the same one to 2 people. I think it was something simpler and stranger. I think we were one person. One mind housed in 2 bodies for reasons of divine economy or divine humor, and the separation between us was an illusion maintained for the convenience of the world, which prefers its people to come in singular form. We slept in the same bed, not because the house lacked space, though it was not large, because sleeping apart was wrong. I mean this in the physical sense. When Maman tried to separate us at the age of 5, giving us each our own small bed in the room we shared, neither of us could sleep. We lay in our separate beds 3 feet apart, and the distance was unbearable, an actual physical discomfort, as though something elastic was stretched between us and the stretching hurt. After 3 nights, Maman gave up and pushed the beds together, and we slept touching, my hand in hers, her breathing synchronized with mine, and the elastic relaxed and we rested. Colette was braver than I was. This is important. In every pair of twins there is one who goes first and one who watches and follows. Colette went first, always. She tasted the strange food first. She waded into the bayou first, deeper, farther, while I stood on the bank and watched. At the feidudos, the dances held on Saturday nights in the parish, Colette was the first on the floor, pulling me behind her. She climbed the live oaks higher than I would go. She spoke to strangers before I could gather the courage. She was not reckless. She was simply unafraid in a way I was not, and I loved her for it, because her fearlessness permitted me to be careful without feeling like a coward. She went first, and I followed, and between us we composed one complete person, one who was brave enough to try and cautious enough to survive. In 1853, yellow fever came to the Teche country. I was 12. The fever had come before. It came to southern Louisiana most summers with the mosquitoes, but the epidemic of 1853 was different in scale. It moved through the parishes with a thoroughness that felt deliberate, as though the fever was not a disease but a will. Our brother Etienne was 8 years old. He sickened on a Tuesday, the fever coming sudden and high, the skin yellowing by Wednesday, the black vomit by Thursday morning, dead by Thursday night. 36 hours from healthy child to buried child. Papa sickened too, but survived, though the fever took something from him that he did not recover, a vitality, a strength in his bearing. He walked slower after, breathed harder, aged in months what should have taken decades. Colette and I did not sicken. Maman kept us in the house with the windows shuttered and burned citronella until the smoke was dense enough to taste. Whether this protected us or whether we were simply lucky, I cannot say. But I learned something during those weeks that Colette did not learn or learn differently. I learned that death was not across the water or over the hill or somewhere distant. Death was in the air, in the water. In the bite of a mosquito, you did not feel landing on your arm. Death was ordinary and random, and it could take an 8-year-old boy in 36 hours and leave his twin sisters untouched and offer no explanation for the selection. This knowledge made me careful, watchful. It installed in me a hesitation that became part of my character so thoroughly that by the time I was 19, I did not recognize it as fear. I thought it was wisdom. I thought being cautious was intelligent and being bold was foolish, and I did not understand that the line between caution and cowardice is so thin that most people cross it without noticing, and I had crossed it years before the day it mattered. Before we continue, a quick word. I've released 14 full recordings that will never be on YouTube. These are the voices too personal, too raw to share publicly, completely unedited, nothing cut. If you want access, the link is in the description. It's called The Lost Recordings, and getting it helps us keep making these videos. All right, back to the story. November of 1860. We, Colette and I, were 19. The sugar cane was being cut. The air smelled of boiling juice from the mill. The weather had cooled from the murderous heat of summer to something merely warm, the brief Louisiana autumn that lasts perhaps 6 weeks before the rains of winter begin. The LeBlanc family in New Iberia, friends of our parents, connected through the vast web of Cajun kinship that links half the families in the Teche country, was hosting a fée doudou, a dance, accordion and fiddle and the two-step and the waltz and food and drink and the particular joy of Cajun gatherings, which is a joy rooted in the conviction that life is brief and uncertain, and the correct response to this brevity is not caution but celebration. The LeBlancs had arranged for a steamboat to carry guests from St. Martinville to New Iberia, a distance of approximately 10 miles down Bayou Teche. The boat was a small packet called the Evangeline, named for the Longfellow poem, as half the boats and streets and hotels in the Teche country were named for the poem that had made the region famous in ways the region itself found both flattering and inaccurate. The Evangeline was a stern-wheeler, compact, designed for the narrow bayou channels where the larger Mississippi packets could not navigate. She carried passengers and light cargo, and she made the run between St. Martinville and New Iberia several times a week. Colette wanted to go. Of course she wanted to go. Colette always wanted to go. Go to the dance, go to the gathering, go where the music was, go where the people were, go where life was being lived loudly and fully. She was 19, and the world was a fée doudou that never ended, and the only wrong thing was to stay home. I did not want to go. I cannot at 86 reconstruct my exact reason, because the reason was trivial, the kind of small reluctance that in an ordinary life disappears by the following morning and is never thought of again. I had a headache, or I was tired, or the November air felt heavy and wrong, or I simply did not feel like it. I have interrogated this moment for 67 years, returning to it at night, during the day, in the middle of conversations about unrelated things, trying to excavate the exact thought that kept me home, the precise constellation of feeling and circumstance that resulted in me saying no. I cannot find it. It is gone, dissolved by decades of searching. The more I look for it, the less I find, as though the act of examining the moment has worn it smooth, erased the details, left only the outline. I did not want to go. That is all that remains. Colette said, "Come, Odette, come with me. It will be fun." I said, "I do not feel like it. My head hurts." "You go. I will stay." She looked at me. I remember this look. I have seen it every day for 67 years. It was not anger. It was something closer to frustration, the frustration of one half of a pair with the other half's refusal to move. She said, "You never feel like it. You are always the one holding back. You held back at the Melanson wedding. You held back at the Thibodeau baptism. You always hold back, and I always have to convince you. And I am tired of convincing you, Odette." She was right. She was right about all of it. I was always the one holding back, the cautious half, the watching half, the half that stood on the bank while the other half waded in. She was not wrong to be frustrated. She had spent 19 years pulling me into life, and I had spent 19 years resisting the pull, not because I did not want to go, but because something in me, some residue of the yellow fever summer, some knowledge of how quickly the ordinary becomes the catastrophic, made me hesitate, always hesitate. Let me think about it. Maybe tomorrow. I do not feel like it today. The vocabulary of caution, the language of the half that stays behind. I said, "Go without me." 3 words, "Go without me." I said them, and they were the first time in 19 years that I had said them. We had never done anything apart. Never. Not a dance, not a market trip, not a visit to a neighbor. We were les Jumelles. We moved as one. To suggest separation was to suggest something that did not have a precedent in our shared existence. Colette looked at me, and I saw something pass through her face that I did not recognize at the time and have been trying to identify since. Hurt, perhaps, or relief, or the particular expression of someone who has been pulling another person for 19 years and has just decided to let go of the rope. "Fine," she said, "I will go." She left that afternoon. She wore her blue dress, the one Maman had made from fabric purchased in New Iberia the previous spring. She pinned her hair up, which she did not often do, and the scar on her chin was visible, the thin white line that was the only difference between us. She looked beautiful. She looked like me, which meant she looked like both of us, which meant I was watching myself leave and staying behind to watch. She kissed me on the cheek at the door. She said, "I will tell you everything when I get back." She walked down to the Bayou landing where the Evangeline was taking on passengers. I watched her from the porch. The boat was small and white, and the paddle wheel was turning slowly in the brown water, and people were boarding, and I could see Colette's blue dress among them. And then the boat pulled away from the landing and moved south down Bayou Teche, and the moss-draped oaks closed behind it like curtains, and she was gone. The Evangeline's boiler exploded at approximately 4 o'clock that afternoon, 4 miles south of St. Martinville. I did not hear the explosion. The distance was too great. I learned later that it was heard in St. Martinville itself, a sound described by those who heard it as a single enormous crack, like thunder concentrated into a point. The boiler, which had been improperly maintained according to the investigation that followed, failed catastrophically, sending superheated steam and fragments of iron through the forward section of the boat. The boat caught fire within minutes. Passengers who were not killed by the explosion or the steam were thrown into the bayou. Some survived, some drowned, some were burned. 7 people died. Colette was one of them. They found her 3 days later. She had been thrown from the boat by the explosion and had gone into the water, and the bayou had taken her downstream and deposited her on a mud bank near Laureauville. My brother-in-law, who had joined the search, identified her by the blue dress and by the scar on her chin. They brought her home in a flat-bottomed boat, laid on boards, covered with a sheet. I was on the porch when the boat came around the bend in the bayou. I saw it before I understood what I was seeing, a boat moving slowly against the current with something on it that was covered and still. My left hand began to ache. I did not know yet. Nobody had told me. But my hand knew. My hand had felt the grip release. I went to the landing. They pulled the boat in. Someone, I do not remember who, pulled back the sheet, and I looked down at my sister, and I looked at my own face. My exact face, dead, the eyes closed, the skin the wrong color, a bruise on the left temple where something had struck her, and the scar on her chin, the thin white line. The only thing that proved this was Colette, and not Odette, and for one terrible instant I was not certain which of us was lying in the boat and which was standing beside it, not certain whether I was the twin who had survived or the twin who had died. The face was mine. It was hers. It was ours. And one of us was dead and the other was not, and the only evidence was a half-inch scar that could have been on either chin if God had arranged the fall differently when we were 3. Maman screamed. I did not. I stood at the landing, and I looked at my twin, and my left hand ached, and I did not scream, because the half of me that screamed was lying in the boat, and the half that remained was the quiet half, the watching half, the half that stayed behind. The funeral was Catholic. Father Bro at Saint Martin de Tours. The church was full because when a young woman dies in a small parish, the parish fills the church, and when the young woman is a twin, the parish looks at the surviving twin with an expression that is partly sympathy and partly something else, a discomfort, as though your continued existence in the absence of your other half is somehow unsettling, a reminder that the natural order has been disrupted, and the disruption is walking around in the shape of the dead girl. I sat in the front pew between Maman and Papa. I wore black. The coffin was in front of me, closed, thank God, closed. And I looked at it and I thought, she is in there and I am out here, and there is no reason at all, no logic, no justice, no sense in the selection. I stayed home because my head hurt. She got on the boat because I told her to go without me. If I had gone, we would have been together. If we had been together, we would have been standing in the same place on the boat. We always stood together. We always stayed close. And maybe that place would not have been near the boiler. Maybe we would have been at the stern, near the paddle wheel, where the explosion did not reach. Maybe both of us would have survived, or maybe both of us would have died. And that, God forgive me, would have been better, because at least she would not have died alone, and I would not have lived alone. And the one thing twins are not designed to do is be singular. I have run the calculations thousands of times. If I had gone, if we had stood here instead of there, if the boiler had held 10 more minutes, long enough to reach New Iberia, if the LeBlancs had not hosted the gathering, if November had been colder and the trip had been canceled, if I had not had a headache, if I had not said go without me, if. The word is a door that opens onto an empty room every time. There is nothing inside the if, no answer, no comfort, no alternative history in which Colette is alive and I am not destroyed. There is only the fact. She went. I stayed. The boiler exploded. She died. I lived. And between those facts lies a space that 67 years of living have not filled and will not fill, because the space is shaped like a person and only that person could fill it, and that person is in the ground at Saint Martin de Tours Cemetery and has been since November of 1860. People told me it was not my fault. Maman told me. Papa told me. Auguste, who I married in 1864, told me. Father Bro told me. God does not blame you, Odette. You could not have known. It was an accident. You are not responsible. These words entered my ears and traveled to the place in my mind where reason lives, and reason accepted them because reason is capable of evaluating evidence, and the evidence clearly indicated that I was not at fault. But reason is not the whole of a person. There is a place beneath reason where twins live, where the connection between two people who shared a womb resides, and that place does not accept evidence. That place knows only that she went, and I stayed, and she died, and I did not. And the arrangement was wrong because the arrangement should have been both or neither. And I broke the arrangement by saying, "Go without me," and I cannot unbreak it, and I cannot forgive myself for breaking it. And 67 years of reasonable people telling me reasonable things has not touched the unreasonable certainty that I should have been on that boat. I married Odette Broussard in 1864. He was a kind man, wide through the shoulders, slow in his speech, deliberate in his movements, with hands that could hold a crawfish trap or a baby with equal gentleness. He courted me with the patience of a man who understood that the woman he wanted was only partially present, that some portion of her was elsewhere, always elsewhere, and that he would need to love what was available and not demand what was not. He was good at this. He loved me with what I could give him, which was substantial but not complete, never complete, because the part of me that would have made it complete was in the bayou and in the ground and in the space beside my left hand where the phantom grip would not release. I had 5 children. Prosper, born 1865, named for my father. Colette, born 1867, named for my sister, which was either a tribute or a cruelty. I have never determined which. Marie, born 1869. Antoine, born 1872. Marguerite, born 1876. I love them completely. I want to say this plainly. I love my children with everything I had. But everything I had was not everything I was. Because I was a half, I was the surviving half of a whole that no longer existed, and a half can love completely within its capacity, while still being only half a capacity. I looked for Colette in my children. I could not help it. When little Colette was born, I searched her face for the other Colette's face and found resemblances that may have been real or may have been desperate, and I could not tell the difference, and it did not matter, because even the strongest resemblance is not the person. And I knew this, and I searched anyway, and I have been searching for 67 years in every face I encounter, looking for the arrangement of features that would mean she is here, she came back, the bayou returned what it took. The war came and went. The Union soldiers occupied the Teche country in 1863. Fought a battle at Bisland, not far from our farm. We heard the cannons. The occupation was hard, as occupation always is, but it was not the center of my life because the center of my life had been removed in 1860, and nothing that happened after, not war, not occupation, not marriage, not children, not the long, steady accumulation of years and experiences that constitute a life, nothing could occupy the center because the center was taken and I could not get it back. Auguste died in 1915, quietly, in his sleep, the way good men die when they have been good long enough. I was 74. I sat beside his bed in the morning and held his hand, and his hand was still warm, and I held it, and I thought, this is what it feels like when a hand you are holding lets go. I knew this feeling. I had known it since 1860, the release, the absence, the space where the grip used to be. I live now with Marguerite in Breaux Bridge. I am 86 years old. I sit on the porch in the mornings and I watch the bayou and the moss and the light coming through the oaks and the water moving south the way it moved south in 1860. carrying a small white steamboat called the Evangeline, toward a boiler that would not hold, and a death that should not have happened, and would not have happened if I had been there, or if she had stayed, or if the world had been arranged differently, or if God had taken both of us or neither of us, instead of making this terrible selection that separated one thing into half a thing, and left the half to wonder for 67 years why it was the half that remained. I have a photograph, a tintype made in 1858 when we were 17. A traveling photographer came through St. Martinville, and Maman paid 50 cents to have her twins photographed together. We stood side by side, not smiling because the exposure required stillness and stillness required solemnity, and the photographer arranged us with our shoulders touching and our hands at our sides, and he made his exposure, and the image was fixed, and it is all I have. I look at this photograph every day, 2 girls, identical, dark hair pinned up, same dress, same face, same height, same everything. I cannot tell which one is me. I have looked for the scar on Colette's chin, but the image is too small, the detail too fine, the tintype too faded after 69 years. The scar does not show. The 2 girls are indistinguishable, and this terrifies me in a way I cannot fully explain, because if I cannot tell which one is me in the photograph, then perhaps I cannot tell which one is me in life. Perhaps the wrong twin survived. Perhaps Odette was the one who went to the dance, and Colette was the one who stayed home. And when the body came back on the flat-bottomed boat, everyone looked at the surviving girl and said, Odette, because there was a scar on the dead girl's chin. But what if the scar was wrong? What if I have the scar? What if in my grief and confusion I have misremembered which chin bore the mark? And I am Colette and Odette is in the ground, and I have spent 67 years grieving for myself. I do not truly believe this. The rational part of me does not believe it. But the twin part of me, the part that lives beneath reason, the part that still reaches for a hand that is not there, that part is not certain. That part has never been certain, because we were one thing and the one thing was broken, and the pieces do not know which is which anymore, and there is no one left alive who could tell us apart, and the photograph will not say, and the scar will not show, and the bayou will not give back what it took. My left hand hurts. I said this at the beginning, and I will say it at the end, because it is the only thing I'm certain of. My hand hurts where her hand used to be. It has hurt for 67 years. It will hurt tomorrow. It will hurt every day I have left. And when I die, if there is anything after this, I expect the first thing I will feel is her hand in mine again, the grip restored, the elastic relaxed, the 2 halves pressed together in whatever darkness or light awaits. And I will not know which of us died first and which of us died second, and it will not matter, because we will be les Jumelles again, and the aching will finally stop. I am 86 years old. I am still reaching.